Hey, thanks for joining us once again on the Gill Athletics Connections Track and Field podcast. Help me welcome today's guest. I'm super excited for this. Help me welcome Brittany Coker. Brittany, how are you?
I'm doing really good. How about you?
Oh, I'm in an office talking to track coaches all day. I'm not sure it actually gets better. Being on the track would be better, but
Right.
where we are, this is pretty good.
You're living the dream.
This is the dream. That is very true. Absolutely. So, Brittany, you are the head girls coach at Taylor High School down in Katy, Texas. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah.
I've been there for 7 years.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So, full disclosure, Brittany and I have known each other for quite a long time. I'm shocked that it's been 7 years. That just seems like yesterday. So tell me, what's it like coaching high school in the great state of Texas, and then coaching high school in what an amazing area for track and field inside of Texas, down there in the Houston area.
Right. So I got this position after my first year of teaching. So I walked in to be a head coach in 2013. I was 25 years old, one of the youngest female coaches for a 6-day program in Texas, and country at the time. I gave that up years ago, and I walked into already an amazing for track and field. Boys side was especially very strong, and our girls side of our district has gotten even stronger. And so it's pretty amazing to be in a district where to make it out to go to regionals in the girls mile, you're having to run under 5 minutes.
Wow. What's help us understand the qualifying for Texas? There's regionals, districts, obviously state. Help us with that.
So we have our district, which is 8 schools, boys and girls. And then we have area meets. So we'll take, let's say, Houston ISD and Katy ISD. And with HISD, they've got more than 8 schools. So it'll be a segment of HISD. And then all of the Katy ISD schools, they'll come together. And you have 4 kids qualify from each event out of area. And then they go on to regionals. And then the top 2 kids at regionals qualify. And then there's 1 wild card from the state. So the highest qualifying mark out of regionals, then there's a 9th kid that will qualify. And then the state meet in Austin in May.
So area, regionals, state.
Yep.
And very famous in Texas, like you said, top 2 from each regional, and that is it. And then the wild card, of course. Is that wild card fairly new, or has that always been around?
I want to say it's been the past 8 to 10 years. So like right when I came into coaching after I got out of college, I think that's when that came about, because the argument always was at the University of Texas where they host the state meet, there's a 9th lane, but it was always empty. So we didn't understand, why are we not utilizing this 9th lane, give another kid an opportunity to make it out, especially in those harder regions to make it out for, we've got our sprint regions, our distance regions, and you want to give those kids as much of an opportunity as possible.
Yeah, there's always as a college track coach, when I used to coach college, when we'd recruit Texas, there was always that kind of famous little cliche. It was truth though, which is crazy, is that, there are people who don't make it to state in Texas who are full ride Division I kids. There's a 3rd place 10, 1500 meter kid or something like that. So yeah, it's just.
Right. Like for example, when I was in high school, we had boys long jump. It was top 2 made it out of district. And first place was 25, 2.5 in the long jump. Second place was 25-1. 24-6 didn't make it out. To even score in our meet, you had to jump over 24 feet.
Wow. I come from Alabama, and in some of our, at least back when I was there, some of our smaller, we had 6 classes in Alabama, by the way, which, coming from Texas, that's just ridiculous. In some of our smaller classes, 24-6 would win the triple jump, just full disclosure.
Wow.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I'm not that far off on some though. So what are you teaching there at Taylor?
So I teach U.S. history. I've been teaching that for 7 years, and I just recently have been asked to teach advanced placement U.S. history. So I'm really excited about that new challenge.
Yeah.
So,
What got you
yeah.
into teaching history versus maybe a science? I just think a track coach.
I've always enjoyed kind of the social sciences. My major actually in college was psychology, and I minored in history. And I thought I was going to go the sports psychology route. Decided I didn't necessarily want to go that extra step with, getting a master's and all of that. I was kind of ready to be done with school. And I've always enjoyed world history. I actually started out teaching world history my first year. And I've always liked to travel. And so travel and history very much go together, and just kind of going to these places where these amazing things have happened and stand there in that presence. It's something just really unique for me. And I like to share that with the kids.
What's been
like JFK is my favorite president.
Oh, okay.
I like to share that.
I was going to ask, where has been the coolest place you've been to that you've been able to like teach or, use that as an experience in the classroom?
This actually goes back to world history. So my mom is originally from England. Her family's all lives over in Europe, except for my grandfather who lives here. And I would go as a kid over to London, and we actually visited Hampton Court, where Henry VIII lived.
Yeah.
And so, I read all about him and all of his different wives, and just standing in the court where they had all of these amazing parties and how extravagant it all was. It's just something really, and to be able to share that with the kids, because kids think of typically like Buckingham Palace. They don't necessarily know about like Hampton Court, they maybe know a little bit about Henry VIII. Being able to kind of tell them like, look, these are pictures, this is what it looked like. And it's really unique to be able to share that.
Now, I am and was terrible at history. So, Miss History Professor Teacher here, give me grace if this is a terrible, terrible segue. Have you seen Hamilton?
I have seen Hamilton.
I am obsessed with Hamilton.
So good.
Okay,
so
good. I don't know where the history relates to what you discuss. Again, I'm terrible at history, but I just found it, because I knew some of the history, of course, it's the founding of America and all that kind of good stuff. I just found it fascinating. And of course, the music, that's what it is. It's a musical, but it hooked me. My wife wanted to watch it, and I was kind of like, musical. And I finally just gave in. And now I'm walking around the house singing the songs. It plays on our Alexa 24/7. Holy cow.
Oh, it's that You'll Be Back, the one with King George where he's singing. That's stuck in my head 24/7. I play that. My husband's like, he can't get it out of his head, and he's like, he's not a big musical guy, and he watched it, and he even enjoyed it, but he's a history guy too. So
see, this is how bad I am. When you said you're at Hampton Square, Hampton Circle, or whatever, and you're talking about King Henry, I immediately went to King George. I'm like, oh, they must be the same guy, or at least related. I don't know.
yeah History's not for everybody.
That's right. Thank goodness I could get a degree without history classes, because I might be sitting here without a degree, that's for sure. So as a high school track coach, we don't get to talk to a lot of high school coaches, track coaches. There's not a lot of resources to bring everybody together on the high school side, as compared to, say, the college with the USTFCCA convention and things like that. What is your biggest struggle as a high school track coach? Is it the athletes and where they are today with technology? Is it not been able to put 100% of your time into coaching because you got to teach? What might be the toughest thing you struggle with?
I would say, my kids are great. Like, behavior issues, don't have them. Nothing like that. With my kids is that they want to do so much, which is great. Like, they want to be in clubs. They want to be in the marching band. They want to play soccer and basketball and volleyball. And so, the unique experience having to share an athlete, I think most high school track coaches can kind of relate to that, is because we can't have our team without kids from other sports. You just always are pulling from that. And with my kids, we're the smallest high school in Katy, the 6A out of the 6A high school. So we've got a little under 3,000 kids.
Jeez.
And we've got schools up to 3,800.
Wow. Holy cow.
Yeah, and so we're the small school,
And you're still,
and
so
so
that's
my
in,
kid.
yeah,
Go ahead.
That's interesting because I went to a school of about 500 kid total, all 500 of us. So
Right.
there was a lot of dual and tri athletes because we wouldn't have teams without that, But of a school of 3,000, you still have a lot of shared athletes, dual athletes, tri-sport athletes.
Absolutely. So I would say 70% of my team is kids coming from other sports.
70%. Do you find now 70% is a big number, so this may not be a fair question. Do you find those athletes that are also doing the volleyball and the football and maybe soccer and basketball, et cetera, do you find them to be your better athletes, or do you find the athletes who just do cross country and track?
To be honest, if you put my team out on the track, I wouldn't be able to tell a difference. I really wouldn't be able to tell a difference. Because the kids that come out and they're volleyball players, and they just jump right into my team and they meld it, and you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. We have a really great athletic department. We've got, a really strong set of values about sharing athletes. And so on the conditioning side, those kids hop right in, and they're in great shape coming from their sport. I see those kids, they're just as athletic as the track and cross country kids that I have full time.
What do you, now you're a high school coach, so I know the typical answer is all of them, but what's the events that you specialize or maybe enjoy the most coaching?
I've always enjoyed the hurdles and the sprints and high jump. High jump's one of my favorites.
I agree.
Don't have as much time as I would like to dedicate to the high jump. Being a head coach, I've kind of got to be everywhere. But whenever I get the opportunity, I like to coach the high jump. The hurdles is probably absolute favorite. It's such a skill, in my opinion.
And if you're listening, we're having a little bit of trouble, Brittany, with our connection. We're kind of going in and out a little bit, though. I think we're still okay, just
okay.
As we go through. So if I ask you to repeat something, it's just we missed a lot of what you just said there.
Okay.
So you mentioned the hurdles and the high jump. So how has it been? Last year I was at the college nationals when we canceled the season. What was it like last year as a high school coach, as a head high school coach, of this turmoil, and how did you explain it to the kids, and how do you move on from here?
So we went into spring break. We actually hosted our JV track meet the Wednesday before spring break. We had a varsity meet on Thursday, and I actually had taken the day off on that Friday to go out of town with my husband. And over spring break, there's already kind of talks about what's going to happen with school. And it was kind of a holding pattern for a while. We didn't necessarily know what the season, were we going to be able to resume. And, I kept telling the kids, just do what you can, stay in shape. Especially with the kids not being there, there's nothing I couldn't require them to do anything, but just trying to keep them encouraged. Like, if we have district, we're going to have it this date. And then eventually when it came down, I had to talk with them and ultimately say, you know what, guys, we've done all of this work. It wasn't for nothing, because we did have a few meets. We finished second in one of our hardest JV meets that we had this past season. I said, so you've got to think about that, and then we can carry that momentum over to next season. So hopefully, by next spring, things look a lot better. And my kids were pretty receptive to it. I had, some seniors who were really, really disappointed. I had one particular senior who, she just joined my program her junior year, and it absolutely broke my heart. She wrote me this letter basically saying that I wish that I joined track sooner because I found out where I belonged in high school.
Oh,
and
man.
so it just broke my heart. And she's going to my alma mater, so I must have had some good influence on her.
So this is an interesting question. So there's a lot of talk among college coaches about how do you recruit kids that their only time is maybe from their sophomore year. The seniors, unfortunately, we only had up to their junior year, and some marks their senior year, but not a full season, right? The junior kids, that's where a lot of your marks come from that are recruitable. That was gone. So now they're coming into
Right.
senior year. A lot of scholarships are assigned early, and I can't remember when the signing periods are anymore, but they certainly don't wait until June of 21. They're signed before that. What would you, well, you do have the ear of a lot of college coaches. A lot of college coaches are listening right now, Brittany. What would you recommend as coaches are trying to struggle to talent identify based off of sophomore marks and, one or two meets junior year marks? What recommendations would you give to college coaches on how maybe to recruit this type of kid, this COVID athlete, if you will?
I would say reaching out to the high school coaches, they're going to be the biggest resource, because there's going to be some of those kids that, maybe they were injured this season, but you can reach out to those high school coaches that you already have a built-in relationship with. And they might tell you, I don't have somebody on my team, but there's this great kid in my district who has X mark. And then they can reach out to that coach, because ultimately I think the high school coach, they know their athletes the best. Not only do they know what their abilities are, they also know what type of student they are. And I think the student athlete aspect is really, really important. And also character. You want to know if you're going to be bringing an athlete into your team that is going to mesh with your team. They're not going to be causing any problems. And I think those high school coaches, just reaching out to those high school coaches and just putting feelers out, like, hey, they may have this kid that you haven't seen a mark on, but they may be kind of up and coming, that you can kind of keep an eye out for.
That's a really good point. I'm putting broad strokes here, but we're so used to looking at marks first that maybe this is an opportunity where we're going to have to do more homework, more relationship building with the high school coach to find out the person and what kind of things is he or she doing in practice that may help me indicate that they may be a better long jumper than they're showing on paper or things like that.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Even like asking for videos, of the athlete, simply just maybe having them, not even necessarily like, a video of them long jumping, maybe having a video of them just working out, and you can kind of show, this is what we're doing right now, and then this is the possibilities that could happen with this particular athlete.
Yeah, that's interesting. It'll be interesting. The part that I'm most curious about is, every year, any normal year, you always have the proverbial kid who slips through the cracks, right? That, maybe doesn't have a great long jump mark, 16 feet out of high school. And so she doesn't get to go to Texas A&M or Florida or wherever. And she goes to, maybe an up and coming program, a UT Tyler, what have you. And then through coaching and just maturation jumps 21 feet, 22, right? That kid would be categorized as slipping through the cracks.
Right, absolutely.
Grossly false, right? Because you can't blame someone not signing a 16-year-old kid to a big time Division I. You wouldn't blame them, right? But I'm interested in these 2 years, these last year's seniors and this year's seniors, and then hopefully we're done talking about it because we're back to normalcy. But I'm interested in these two classes because there'll be so little on the paper results. Does the distribution go more flat instead of all to the Power 5 schools first, and then Division I, Division II, Division III, if you will?
Right, and a way to look at it as well is that we're all in the same boat. All of the high school athletes are in the same boat right now in terms of they didn't have really a way to finish their seasons. So they're all in the same boat. It's not like one kid has an advantage over another kid because they got to have a longer season. Pretty much across the country, their seasons were cut short. Mm-hmm. So, it's kind of a positive spin to a very negative situation.
Yeah, that's a good teacher right there. A good teacher says, no, I know I have to give you a lot of homework, but here's the good news about it. You're so good at that. That's awesome. Well, you mentioned the one athlete who I wish would have joined track earlier as well, and she went to your alma mater, and you're talking about the student athlete experience and things like that. Talk to us about, you have a pretty unique college background in the sense that you weren't I'm going to call it the traditional athlete in college as it relates to track and field. Tell us kind of where you went to school and what did you do with track and field?
So I actually went my freshman year to Kansas State University and worked with Clifford Belto as a team manager. And I actually had a portion of my school paid for, and I got to travel with the cross country and track teams around the country. And I got to sit and listen to Clifford Belto, who is one of, the best track and field coaches. He's got just this amazing mind for track and field, and just spending every day at the track and being able to listen to him and learn from him and just, steal what I could for when I went into coaching. And it was a really unique opportunity. I got to go to Hayward Field and sit there in the stands where all of these historical events had happened in track and field, and just take that all in and go to pre-rock. And actually at Hayward Field, there's the statue of Bill Bowerman, and he's standing on the waffle iron. Unique story with that is that I actually have one of those sitting over at my parents' house. It's a smaller statue that my dad won when his athlete won the national championship in the mile for it was the Nike Indoor Nationals.
Wow, is that right?
Yeah.
How big? Like a foot tall?
It's about that big. So it's kind of hard to do it on Zoom. It weighs about 60 pounds. It's pretty heavy.
That's really
And that was the
cool.
last one they gave away. It was in 2004.
Did they do it just for the mile winner?
Just for the mile winner. So the boys coach and the girls coach of the mile received that.
That's cool. I like that. That's really cool.
And so I spent my year at Kansas State, and then I had my grandmother, who I was very close with growing up, lived just 10 minutes away from me, got sick, and I decided to come closer to home. So I came to Texas A&M, and I got to be a manager with their program, have a portion of my school paid for, and work with Pat Henry and Vince Anderson. So working with these amazing coaches, once again, just trying to absorb everything and getting to travel with them to New York and out to California, to UCLA, go to all of these great track facilities and just be a part of an amazing program. When I was there, I believe it was 2009, 2010, A&M won the National Outdoor Championship.
Oh, yeah.
So I got to be a part of that and have the championship rings, and pretty cool.
That is really cool. That's a really unique aspect. We talked to track coaches and we've talked to athletes. I don't think we've talked to very many, I hate to call them people behind the scene because you're so vital to what you do. What were some of the things that you were responsible for as the manager?
So at Kansas State, it was a lot of setting up practice. So making sure things were ready to go, whether that be setting up hurdles for drills or med balls for warm-ups. And then like traveling to meet, I would be making sure that if anything needed to be filmed or having to pick up any equipment, if I had to go run back to the hotel and pick something up, making sure that the athletes have everything they needed. And then when I got to A&M, we would travel. It was same filming. We had 3 managers on staff at A&M, so we kind of got to rotate jobs a little bit. We would make sure that their nutritional needs were taken care of. So making sure we'd go actually to the grocery store once we got to wherever we were traveling to, and we pick up snacks for them so they would have stuff at the meet, so they weren't having to worry about things like that. And honestly, just getting to travel too, just being an additional support for the athletes.
Yeah, and the coaches, right? I mean, you talked about the grocery run, which all of us as coaches have done. And it's like, well, when I was out doing the groceries, my athlete needed this, and I had to talk to the trainer about this, and I had to get the relay result or roster in. It's like, man, to have that kind of help is invaluable. You're helping the athletes by helping the coaches even in that role. Right.
We worked under the director of operations, Brian Bancroft. Mm-hmm. So, and, great guy. He would delegate, and it was just an additional support system for the athletes. And I took it ultimately as a huge opportunity to, you know, be a part of an amazing program and to learn as much as I could.
Yeah,
So ultimately, I knew I wanted to go into coaching.
did you hang out at practice and like watch Coach Anderson do his thing and Coach Henry? And...
Oh, so I mostly worked with Coach Henry. So I was with the male sprinters, which is a really unique experience. I would spend the entire practice with the male sprinters, and they were just a fun group of guys. And I got to basically learn. I mean, I learned about, you know, all of those guys and their kind of unique personalities, their unique backgrounds, and then how he would run practice. And a lot of the way Coach Henry runs practice is the way that I run practice.
Interesting.
You know, you don't show up late. You show up late, you might, he would turn around, go back home, you know.
Wow.
You never showed up to practice late. And that was including the managers. So you made sure that you were to practice on time. The way that they do warm-ups, I incorporate a lot of what they do for warm-ups. I can't incorporate everything because I learned from Cliff Revelta a lot of the med ball activation exercises. I took all of that and I've kind of banked all this different stuff. And my athlete's like, where did you get this all from? I'm like, from the most amazing coaches in track and field.
Yeah, it'd be hard to disagree with you as your athlete, because it's like, okay, this is backed up by Pat Henry, Vince Anderson, Clifford Velta.
Right.
You know, amazing coaches, and knowing each one of those guys and gals personally, great people too. That's what's so fun about that. Yeah. So you got to do a lot of traveling with them, a lot of maybe in the office talking about what to do, what we're going to do at practice and setting that stuff up. I'm going to put you on the spot here. Who was the most fun to work with?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I would say that probably I would say Vince Anderson. And even though I didn't spend a lot of time with him, he's just a really unique guy in the way that he looks at track and field. He has a little bit of an architecture background, and he applies a lot of that to the way he coaches and the way that he, just the way his mind works. And just sitting, on the bus, traveling from the airport to the hotel where we were staying at, and I'd sit up at the front and I would just talk to him about, his opinion on, sprint mechanics. And he would go into this whole, story, and he would tie it into something with architecture, and it's just mind-blowing. I can't even describe. It's just really unique. And he was just a super nice guy. But I mean, like you said, all of those guys are just great people on top of being great coaches.
Now, they are such good coaches, and that they have especially at the age and stage that they're at, that you're with them and today, they have their particulars, right? They want those hurdles a certain way, or they want the med balls. Mm-hmm. Who was the most, I'm going to use the term fanatical, who was the most like, hey, Brittany, that hurdle is 1 inch off? Was there anybody that was like really particular about that?
I wouldn't say fanatical. So Coach Henry was very particular, but he always gave a reason as to why he wanted it a certain way. It wasn't just, I want it that way because I want it that way. He would explain, this is why I want it this way, and he would do it that way. He would help you get to that point. It wasn't just go do it and then jump your butt if you didn't do it right. He was never one to jump my butt, but he would explain, this is why things need to be done a certain way.
I got to work with him as the host of the I think it's 2019, 2012, not 20, right? 2008 years just run together now because of coronavirus. 2 indoor national championships back to back at Texas A&M, and so I got to work with him as the head coach, and Brian Braincroft there as well, and Jeremy Kinney, was that his name? Do you remember Jeremy? Yeah, great guy there. DJ. This bunch of
I don't think I was there. Yeah.
Yeah, a bunch of great people at Texas A&M as it involves their athletic staff. It was quite amazing. You must have had an amazing experience, because those people were just amazing to work with as we hosted the national championship there. But what I was really impressed with Pat Henry is he's trying to win the national championship, and yet he knew every detail. And like in a good way, not in over, I use the term fanatical, but like in a very poignant, like this is important. The way people come into the stadium is important. The presentation that we give is important. Like he was really I don't want to overstate and say all thinking, but like really, there was nothing too little that was not important to him, if that makes sense, in all a good way.
Absolutely. So I actually got to open that indoor facility.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I actually, when I was there when it was being built, and then we actually hosted the national championship there. So, and we hosted conference, and I remember Coach Henry was he's very detail oriented, for sure. And he did one in a certain way. And like you said, you could win a national championship. It was 2017, because I was actually at the indoor meet that they won I didn't even know that, to be honest, I hadn't been following indoor track that much because I'd had a lot of stuff going on with school. I didn't even realize A&M was kind of in the hunt. I mean, they're always kind of in the hunt, and then, it came down to the 4x4 and they ended up winning the national championship. But like you said, Coach Henry's all around coaching his athletes, but also making sure the meet's run correctly.
Yeah. And that was amazing, that 4x4, and winning it at home is always special. Oregon won the women by 1,000 points, I think it was. What a meet.
Right.
What a meet.
Yeah, it was absolutely incredible. And I actually they let all the alumni come down onto the field, and we did our Aggie War Hymn and all of that. So that was pretty cool.
See, while you were doing that and all the confetti and stuff was around there, I was busting my butt trying to get pits and hurdles and everything moved to get staged. And, Pat wanted us out of there, so we had to get to work.
Absolutely.
So, Brittany, you and I have actually known each other for a long time, since you're around 14, 15, 16 years old, because you grew up, this is super interesting to me, you grew up any stereotype you can think of, you grew up a coach's kid.
Yep.
Usually we hear about that with football, right? The coach's kid that becomes the quarterback and his dad coaches them throughout maybe different stages and stuff like that. This is super unique because it's in the track and field world. The way I met you, I was coaching at Mississippi State and was recruiting some kids. Your dad was the coach of a Cinco Ranch there in Katy. And I remember coming to your house. I was in town, probably visiting one of the kids, and went to your house and knocked on the door. And you answered the door, and you were like, "Who are you?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, who is it?" I was like, I'm trying to speak Coach Derks, I think. It's like Mike Cunningham, Mississippi State. And I somehow remember you had a clipboard or something. I don't know, man. It seemed very like I was getting interrogated to come inside the house to talk to your dad.
I think that with that story, I don't think my dad was home, and you were like, "Well, I can come back." And I said, "Well, what information do you need?" And so you came in, and my mom was there. My dad was at track practice or something, and I was like, "Well, I can give you all the information you need." And you're like, "No, I think it's okay." And I was like, "Well, no, I can tell you their SAT scores,
Yes.
I can tell you all of their marks, their class rank, everything that you need to know." And I think by the end of it, you said something along the lines of, "Well, when can you graduate to come to Mississippi State?"
Yes, that's right. I quickly turned it into a job interview. I was like, "Well, hold on a minute now. So when do you graduate? Because we can use this back in Starkville." Absolutely. I obviously was right because you went to Manhattan and College Station and did great. So I had a talent identification.
You did.
So your dad, Gary Derks, who, if you are listening right now and you ever met Coach Derks, if you ever met Gary, you know the person we're talking about here. One of just the most amazing people, enthusiastic, obviously a great coach. I actually put that maybe 4th or 5th on my list of Gary because of just the amazing person he was and the enthusiasm and thirst for knowledge, thirst for helping other people. Just an amazing man. Well, that's Brittany. I almost said that's Gary's. That's Brittany's dad. And unfortunately, Gary passed away in 2016. So I thought it would just be a lot of fun. If you knew Gary, you're going to have a lot of fun because we're going to hear some stories. And if you didn't know Gary, well, honestly, I feel sorry for you. He was a 1 in a million person that I'm so grateful of how I met and got to meet him, and then went on to recruit some of his kids. And then throughout, I'll have some stories here as we talk about it. But Brittany, tell us about what it was like growing up as a coach's kid, and then with that, growing up as Gary Derks' kid.
So I basically was born and pretty much spent my life on the track, especially during the summers. My dad had a summer program. that he started here in the Katy area. It was called Westside Track Club. We're on the west side of Houston. And ironically enough, that where he used to host his track club is actually the school where I coach at now.
Oh, wow.
So that was pretty cool. And it was him, and then he had one other coach whose name was Dennis Lemon. He coached the throwers, and he coached Bill Hobson, who he ended up throwing at Mizzou. And then Dallas Griffin, who threw 190 in the discus in high school and played football for the University of Texas. And so he coached the throwers, and my dad coached a little bit of everything else. And so I hung around the track every summer. I couldn't do swim team, couldn't do anything else because my dad had track practice. That was it. My mom told me my mom would go to work and my dad would have his summer track program. And so every summer we'd have sign up. I'd be there from 8 o'clock in the morning until probably 12:30. And then my dad and I would go eat lunch. And then I'd usually go back with him in the afternoons. He'd have practice at 5 o'clock in the afternoon as well. And he tried to get me to run. And one thing about my dad was he knew that he had very high expectations for his athletes, and I was not a runner. No endurance, zero. And he would have me come out and try. I'd always finish dead last in the warm-up. It was just like, Dad, this is not for me. And he'd never put any pressure on me. My mom actually, of all people, put more pressure on me. She was like, I don't understand why you can't be an athlete. Your dad is, this amazing coach, blah, blah, blah. Wow. And I don't hold that against my mom. My mom is just as competitive as my dad was, but she just didn't understand. And my dad was perfectly okay with it. I mean, the joke always was, especially when I got into high school, was do not run on my track, Britt, because if you do, you're going to ruin my reputation.
Oh, I can see him saying that.
And he's not wrong. I won't demonstrate my running form, but it's terrible. It's horrible.
So you don't do any demonstrations for your kids now as a coach of your own program?
I always find the athlete that can do the demonstrations for me. And so what was unique, so I spent all that time growing up with track, but didn't necessarily really have an interest in it until I got into high school. So I was 14 years old, freshman year. I loved basketball. And up until 8th grade, I was tall. I was 5'6", so I was taller than most of the girls. And I played post. Well, 5'6" playing post in high school ain't gonna happen. So I decided my dad said, why don't you switch into the track class and we'll figure out something to do. I thought, all right. And so I started getting on to DieStat, the old track website way back in the day.
Absolutely.
And I started doing research. I'm like, Eric Stanley, he's got mono, and he, you can put this athlete in this race because he's got mono, so he's not going to be able to run. So you can qualify that kid out to state. And my dad was like, how did you find all of this out? And I said, I just started doing some research and got on the discussion boards and started making connections with a lot of the athletes. And I started just really getting into it. And he and I bonded. And we had this unique bond that I think a lot of high school girls don't have with their dads. They kind of lose that. They get to, 14, 15 years old. They're like, I don't want to be around my dad. And all I wanted to do was be around my dad and talk about cross country and track and just take everything in. So I basically kind of became his unofficial assistant coach when I was 15 years old.
Have you ever seen the movie or maybe read the book Moneyball?
Yes. Yeah.
About the analytics that came into baseball. And of course, now it's throughout all sports. You were kind of like the rudimentary, first level statistical analysis of not just how fast is a kid, but hey, this kid has mono. So if you put him in this race, like that's really amazing. And back in 2005, the internet wasn't great by any means. It definitely is better than when I grew up, Brittany. That's how old I am. But certainly social media wasn't a big deal. Facebook was just getting into some different colleges, so you didn't have that. You had DieStat, which shout out to John Dye for starting DyeStat. He doesn't get the credit maybe anymore that he should, but what a giant in leaping statistics nationally for us in the great sport of track and field, man. Holy cow. Wow. So when you said, you talked about high school, back up just a second. How old were you, like when you first started doing the summer track, the West Side Track Club? How old were you when you were first doing that with Dad?
I would say that like the earliest I remember was being about 6 years old.
Wow. So you have been in track your whole life, and a very unique experience though.
Yeah. So I mean, always just kind of hanging out on the sidelines.
Yeah.
I never ran a track race in my entire life.
Is that right?
Never.
Hey, when I started this podcast, Brittany, if you would have said, hey, you're going to interview someone on the Gill Track and Field Connections podcast that never ran a track race, I'd be like, whatever, of course I am. Come on. They all have to have run some race. We're all track and field people here. That's super unique. What was it like when I met your dad? So it was around, I'm pretty sure it wasn't until I went to Mississippi State. So I was at Ball State before that. Maybe it was just before that, because I started doing the high hurdle, junior elite high hurdles at Chula Vista and Olympic Training Center. And so there were some kids, you probably are going to remember every one of their names. There was a really good long jumper, high jumper, a couple of good long jumpers. This 0405 area team was just stacked. It was amazing. Did you know, well, of course you were on DyeStat. Of course you knew how good they were, but did you get a sense of how good this team was and how special it was?
Those kids had been around my dad since they were in junior high. So my dad had actually been at Beck Junior High, which is the feeder to Cinco. He opened that school back in '97. And so a lot of those kids, they did, and they was not affiliated with school. They did his summer track program. And so he had them in junior high. They would have their junior high track season, and they came and ran in the summertime. Well, he had 1 year where he was at Langham Creek High School, and then he opened up Cinco Ranch High School. Well, all of those kids had been in his summer program and been with him in junior high, came to Cinco. And so he'd already built this huge relationship with them, and he'd given them this great base already, which we talk about, I think there's a book that it talks about 10,000 hours, to practice something to become an expert. Well, these kids already had that background. They already had been practicing hurdles since they were in 6th grade, or high jumping. Now, Scott Sellers was not a good high jumper in in junior high.
I was going to say, what? Yeah.
High school, yes. Junior high, no.
You just made me question every memory I have. I was like, wait a minute. He was like,
no.
Okay, good.
So junior high, no. High school, yes. But my dad didn't know Scott until he got into high school. But all of those guys came in, and by no means did I think that they were going to be this, nationally renowned team. But my dad kept, started talking with them from fairly early on, saying, guys, we've got a shot to win the state championship, and he was talking about this years in advance, but this is what we have to do to win state. He already had it in his mind. This is where we can score what, and this is where our strong events are. And he was already ready. He had it in his mind. He was winning a state championship with those guys.
Wow. So back up real quick, just because it's one of my favorite authors. The book you mentioned about 10,000 hours, there's a lot of studies and stuff, but the author's name is Malcolm Gladwell. The reason I love him is, first of all, his books are just amazing. I know I've talked about him here on the podcast before, but also interesting is Malcolm Gladwell is a track guy. He was, I think, a miler or a quarter miler up in Canada. If you follow him on Twitter, you'll see he'll comment on track people's stuff. He's a track nerd, man. He just loves it. So, and I think that 10,000 hours was either in Tipping Point or Blink, and I'm pretty sure it's in Tipping Point. But no matter what, go read all of Malcolm's books. They are honestly amazing. David and Goliath, The Perfect Stranger. I mean, they are just, I love them all. So you mentioned Scott Sellers. So Scott Sellers is what? Did he jump 7.5?
Yeah, so 7.5 and a quarter.
Yeah, see, I knew you would know it down to the, was also a really good triple jumper. Maybe he jumped 50 feet in high school?
close. It was like 49-10
Yeah. And
ish. Yeah.
of course, a pretty good long jumper on top of that as well.
And I have an interesting story about Scott with the triple jump.
Okay, let's hear it.
So Scott was known for the high jump. So started out freshman year, tried to qualify for Texas relays, jumped 6'6", which was the qualifying mark for the meet. Texas relays didn't let him in. He said, well, next time I'm here, I'm going to make sure they realize that they made a mistake. And he ended up winning the state championship in the high jump his freshman year.
Wow.
Well, that next year, he was just still high jumping. Comes to his junior year. His junior year was the year that we were trying to win the state team title. Hadn't triple jumped all year. Had never even really tried triple jump. My dad was sitting there thinking, we need some points somewhere else. What do you think about trying the triple jump? Goes out the first day at practice and jumps like 47.6, just not full approach, just kind of playing around.
Wow.
Goes to the district meet the next week, breaks the district record.
Holy cow. I mean, he obviously was naturally, he ended up being a 7'5" high school jumper. It goes to Kansas State, if I remember correctly.
Yep, that's
Cliff,
correct.
yeah.
Yep.
Which Cliff, arguably one of the best high jump coaches in the world, right. Actually. Yeah. And I remember there was at Mississippi State, we were recruiting one of the kids. I think he ended up going to Tennessee, a decathlete, Tyler.
Tyler Whittam. He ended up going to Rice. Yeah,
okay, that's right. Rice, yeah, did well. Yeah. A couple of good long jumpers that I remember. I think I met your dad. I think it was Tyler that we had. No. It was the high jumper. He was out there. I was on the hurdle staff, but your dad was out there with him for the high jumps. The high jumpers were at the same time. Yeah. And so your dad came over to our group. I think that might have been the year we had Justin Gatlin and maybe Ted Ginn and things. I mean, we just had just a killer crew that we had out there. And so your dad came over because he's your dad. He was just like, oh, hurdle. Like he's gravitated towards the hurdles. Right. That was like his passion. I knew passion was track and field, but he loved hurdles. And I remember he came over and we just started talking, struck up a conversation. That is how I met him, because that's how I got in to start recruiting these kids when I went to Mississippi State the next year. That's it. Okay. The memory's in here somewhere, Brittany. There's no room for history. So you'd think I'd have a better room for track and field. And that's how I met him. And we talked about some different things that I did as a hurdles coach back then. And what amazed me, here's my favorite story about Gary for me, besides recruiting and, being in Katy and hanging out with you guys and stuff. But I lost touch with Gary for quite a while. After Mississippi State, I did this crazy thing and moved to Vegas and played poker for a living, and then came here to Gill and stuff. But I was at the New Mexico Track Coaches Association. I don't know, it had to be 2010-ish. I probably haven't talked to your dad in 5-6 years, maybe at this point. And I saw that he was speaking. He was one of the speakers there. And I was there as a vendor, for Gill. And I was like, oh, I want to say hi to him. I'm sure he doesn't even remember me. It'd been for a long time. I never actually got to sign one of his kids. So, it's not like we had some kind of deep relationship in my mind. And so your dad comes out of the room, and of course there's so many coaches following him, asking, what do you do here? Your dad just, the presentation was just 50% of it. He would just sit in the bar area and just talk, to anybody. Yeah. I hate to say that anybody would listen. People kept asking him questions. And so I see your dad. Now, I haven't seen your dad, like I said, minimum 5 years. It's probably 6 or 7, had any contact with him. He sees me immediately. He goes, Cunningham. And I was like, holy crap, how does he remember me? And he goes, dude. And I think I said something like, holy crap, how do you remember me? He goes, dude, I've got a drill that I call the Cunningham hurdle drill because of you. And it was one of the most humbling, I got to meet and talk with this guy, overall, very, very, very small part of his life and my life. And he listened to me. He put some things that we talked about in action, humbled me enough to name it, to have that kind of humility. And then the icing on the cake, if you will, to remember me by sight 5-6 years later. That was that told me, I knew he was a good guy from, being around him and stuff. That is what told me, it's like, oh, this dude's on a whole nother level of goodness, of
Yeah.
thinking of others first.
I mean, he would be at track meets and he would see it'd be a coach from, across the field. And he's like, that was my athlete back in middle school when I first started out in 1991. And I'm like, no way. And sure enough, that coach would come up, like, Coach Derks, what's up? How are you doing? And these were kids who were on his junior high team. And they just remembered him. I mean, if it says anything, when my dad passed away and we had the memorial service for him, we had to have an overflow at the track stadium, or at the stadium at Cinco Ranch High School, because there was, at least from the guest book, which not everybody got on the guest book, there was over 1,000 people who were there. They were putting people in closets, piping it in.
Wow.
And just all of these people who wanted to celebrate him and just be a part. And it was so humbling. And that's what makes me continue wanting to teach and coach, is to make that level of impact. I mean, he had these great teams, but he also developed these great people. That was one of the big things, is he was like, you're not just going to be a good athlete, you're going to be a good person too.
You're in a unique position, growing up as really daughter is the most awesome title you can have as it relates to Gary, but really an assistant coach. You guys were, was it thick as thieves is what they said. You guys were just so close beyond traditional. I have a 6-year-old girl, and I just think, man, you talked about the high school years. It scares me to death. I don't know what's going to happen. So that type of relationship is just super special. You're in a unique situation that you're now, with him passing, you're now in his shoes, in the sense of, as a track coach, and you get to, and you worked with amazing people like Pat and Cliff and what have you, and I'm sure you get to see college coaches a lot. Do you get like the random, a coach will come up and be like, hey man, I knew your dad from XYZ, or hey, your dad did this, or do you ever get those? Or
all the time. All the time. Especially like, because the area that I'm in, I didn't go far from home, and so a lot of those coaches will still reach out. They're one of the kids that my dad actually coached at Missouri City Middle School. I still somewhat keep in contact with him. His name is Maurice Enriquez, and he coaches at Niwot High School in Colorado, which they have their own amazing program. And he reached out to me, just asking about stories about my dad, because he wanted to share it with his athletes. But he would call my dad and talk to him almost every week before he passed away.
Wow.
And there's so many coaches like that. And it amazes me that my dad had all these great relationships with all of these coaches and all of these athletes, that he even had any time for family, and he still had all this time. So he made it a point to have all of these relationships and have all these bonds for people while still having a strong bond with his family.
I remember talking with him through a couple of different things, and I just remember, and maybe you have or haven't heard this, Brittany, but to me it's important to tell you this. Like, one year he saw me at the USCCA. It was probably in San Antonio, I'm sure. And he comes up and he tells me, he's like, hey, do you remember my daughter, Brittany? And I was like, oh yeah, she gave me the riot act at the door, and he was just telling me, the things that you had done at Kansas State, and he was so proud of you. And I thought it was interesting, because it's one thing to brag about your own kid, and it's special, but no questions asked. But he's coached so many great athletes, and I'm a track guy, so the natural story is to tell about the fun times with Scott jumping 7.5 or whatever, right? And he never spoke to me about those kids. It was always about you, Brittany. It was always, do you remember when she would answer the door? Oh man, she'd get, that's all he talked about. And this was before I had kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was before I even had kids. So it wasn't like he was like, hey man, you're gonna have this with your daughter. He was just so proud. of the relationship that you guys had, and the really, I think what it boils down to, hearing more about your story and knowing a little bit about your story, is really the selflessness that you gave your dad, and then through your dad, athletes and other coaches. I mean, you could have, no one would have blamed you as a high schooler to, hey, you know what, Dad, I'm gonna, instead of helping out this year, I'm gonna go hang out with my friends, or I'm gonna join choir, whatever. I'm gonna go do my own thing. I'll find who I am, right? When in reality, this is who you are the whole time.
Yeah.
But you're so selfless that it was like, hey, no, this is what I enjoy. This is who I am. Spending time with you, Dad. And I just think I know he just ate that up. That was everything to him. As much as track and hurdles and all the stuff that he did, man, that was his everything right there. So clear, so clear.
Yeah. And I just remember when I got my first head coaching job, and he had retired. So he retired from 2010 to 2013. So right when I got my head coaching job, and he was just telling everybody. And I was like, Dad, don't tell everybody, because I'm just starting out. I don't even know what I'm doing yet. And he was like, Britt, you know way more than what a lot of head coaches already know, that they don't know. And he ended up coming back, and he went to coach at his high school. His high school, he graduated from Springwoods High School in just a little bit further east, right outside of the Loop in Houston. And he was coaching cross country. I was coaching cross country. Well, my first cross country meet as a head coach, he and I were competing against each other. And I told him, I said, Dad, if I beat you, you're going to have to retire again. And my team beat his team, but he didn't retire.
I love that he was pumping you up on your very first job. I mean, that's the role of a coach, right? To believe in you, to see in you more than you can see today. That's exactly right. He knew what you were going to become and do. He's known you your whole life. You had to be convinced.
I still, being 25 years old was a little nerve-wracking. I was like, I'm one of the youngest head coaches, period. And I'm a female. And it's just like, I didn't know. I was like, what am I getting myself into? I barely know what I'm teaching in the classroom. I don't know. I'm like, I just got into all of this, and
oh man.
But I for sure followed my passion, and I try and live up to his legacy as much as possible. I mean, it's kind of hard to live up to a team, though. My team will never be like his teams. 2 13-6 hurdlers, 16 for vaulter, 409 miler, 855 2-miler, all this crazy stuff that my team will never live up to that. But more importantly for me, it's making sure my athletes are good people, because that's what my dad focused on. Was you're a good person, you're going to end up doing the right things to become a good athlete.
Well, if you would give me permission, I want to channel your dad here a little bit. What you just said is not true. Your teams will be just as good as his teams. And certainly the personality and character is there for the kids and how you teach them. But you are going to surpass. That's what he poured into you for, was to surpass all the things that he did. You know that. This is your dad right here saying, "Hey, man, you will do this. You have the ability in you. You've got to see it, because we see it for sure."
Well, I appreciate that. If I have a team that great, that would be amazing. But I have great kids already, so they're awesome people.
That's right. Well, as we start to wrap up today, Brittany, what's another just story you might share about your dad? I know there's so many going through your head as soon as I said that. I know there's just so many wonderful things that he meant to so many people, 1,000 people minimum at his. That doesn't surprise me at all, to be real frank. Absolutely.
To kind of tie in with me being my dad's assistant. So I remember we were at a meet here in Houston. I won't name the school that we were at, but we had 3 athletes that could jump over 24 feet in the long jump. And one of those athletes, I felt like, was getting some unfair calls on scratches. And I proceed to go up to whoever was running off the long jump, and as you know, I could read the riot act to him, and because my dad was about to, and I went and did it before he even said anything. And I remember coming back and he was like, well, you got that taken care of. You look like some of these coaches out here and you're just 16 years old. You had no problem walking up to them and just telling them how you felt. Well, and sure enough, that kid jumped 24-6 that day. So.
Man, I tell you what, Brittany, super unique growing up as a coach's kid, and then under a dad, a coach who just so successful, not only athletically and what he was helped the athletes produce, but just as a person, how successful he was. I see it routinely when you and I do happen to cross paths. You know, every once in a while we see each other at a convention or to meet and everything. And I tell you what, I see that personality and that character of your dad in you every time that we do have the ability to see each other, or the pictures that I'll see and you and your husband and the fam, just, you know, all this is just so great. I see him. You are definitely carrying on the legacy, if you will. I'm not even sure what all that means, you know, but I mean, like, your dad's just so proud. Everybody's so proud. The ones that knew your dad and knows what you're doing. It's just so special. I mean, what you do is coach in high school. I come from the college coaching background, so that's always more of my bend and my society network. But I tell you, I have so much just respect in my heart for what high school coaches do, because you're teaching, and I think teachers are just the most undervalued people in this world. And then on top of that, you're setting up in our sport of track and field these great kids to go on and maybe be first-time college students and college graduates, and really changing lives with that ability. So I'm just so thankful that you would share your story and share Gary's story today on the Connections podcast.
Well, thank you very much for having me on. Getting to, you know, talk about my dad helps me kind of remember things, and, I don't ever want people to forget about him. So I think he's a little bit hard to forget, though, if you ever met him.
That is the truthful thing ever in this podcast right here. Brittany, thank you so much for just being humble, sharing those stories with me. I know sometimes that can be difficult. The good news is we're talking about something so positive and so enriching, and that is the life that your father did live, the time he was with us, and the great things that you're doing as well in this great sport of track and field. So again, Brittany, thank you so much. Really appreciate you today here on the podcast.
Thank you again.
All right. Have a great day.